My name is Dan Hall. I'm 56, and I watched my wife murder my name in public, without a flinch, without a tear, without looking back. It happened in the most ordinary place for something so final. Division 3, Jackson County Courthouse. The room was beige, sterile. The air conditioner clicked on every 12 minutes. A rusted clock ticked above the judge's head like it was trying to count down the seconds until I disappeared from her life. I was dressed in a second-hand suit that smelled like dust and mothballs. Navy blue, too tight at the neck. The tie was borrowed from a neighbor who'd worn it to his mother's funeral. I had pressed the shirt myself at 6:20 that morning. Susan didn't look at me. Not once. She sat 3 chairs down at the long oak table, her fingers folded neatly over a yellow legal pad, as if she were taking notes at a seminar about how to erase a man. Then she stood. She stood like she had something noble to say, like she was about to make a victim statement. And she said it, right there in front of the judge, the clerk, a few strangers waiting for their turn at misery. Your Honor, I need to be honest. The man sitting across from me is a useless nobody with a fake past. He's been lying to everyone. To me, to this court. He built our marriage on deception. There was a pause afterward, not long, just enough for the air to settle. It wasn't loud. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't shout. That's what made it worse. She meant it. There was no emotion, no tremor, just cold execution. Mark Ellerton, her lawyer, stood beside her, hands folded like a priest delivering a eulogy. He didn't add anything, didn't need to. They had rehearsed this. I could see it in the way she paused for effect, the practiced tremble in her voice when she said fake past. She hit that phrase like it had been underlined in a script. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't ask why, because I already knew. This was her theater, and I was cast as the fraud. The judge, a tired man named Harold Green with a face like a worn-out leather boot, looked over his glasses at me. His eyes lingered a little longer than necessary. Maybe he was waiting for a reaction. Maybe he thought I'd jump up and object. But I didn't, because the story Susan was spinning wasn't new to me. I'd been living under its shadow for years. She always talked about our early days like they were some quaint tragedy. Eating chili out of plastic bowls on the floor of our trailer in Jackson Pines. No insulation, mice in the walls, 2 busted heaters. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs back then. Night shift loading trucks, weekend shifts doing maintenance for a moldy motel chain. I'd come home at sunrise, dead on my feet, and she'd hand me a mug of instant coffee and sit on my lap like we were teenagers. Back then, she said I was strong, said I was reliable, said she'd never leave a man who worked that hard for her. Funny how fast love gets replaced by narrative. One day you're a provider, the next you're a lie. She told that courtroom I had fabricated my work history, said I claimed military service I didn't earn, claimed income one didn't make. She said I was hiding assets, hiding my real life from the court. And Mark, that slick bastard, just stood there, letting her words bleed all over the truth like it was gospel. I should have felt fury. I should have felt shame. But I felt something else. Fatigue. Not the kind that sleep fixes. The kind that settles in your bones after years of being unseen. After decades of showing up and still being treated like a ghost. She had stopped seeing me a long time ago. It wasn't just in the way she talked to me or didn't. It was in the silence during dinners, the way her phone always rang in the other room, the names I didn't recognize in her call logs. It was in how her family stopped inviting me to Christmas. How her eyes flickered when I asked where she'd been. I didn't dig. Not at first. I didn't want to know. I told myself it was just a rough patch. 25 years in, every marriage had them. But this wasn't a patch. It was rot. And I was too proud, too tired, or too stupid to call it what it was. And yet, the moment she stood up and declared me a fraud in front of strangers, that was when I finally saw her clearly. Not the woman I married. Not the girl with dirt under her fingernails and a busted Ford truck. But the woman she had become, calculated, polished, willing to incinerate a man if it meant gaining 1 extra inch of courtroom leverage. Then the judge turned the page, flipped it, squinted, and said a single number out loud. Mr. Hall reported $520,000 in income last year. That's when everything changed. Susan's face drained. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Mark blinked once, just once, but it was enough to let me know the floor had dropped out from under them. I didn't smile. I didn't look smug. I didn't even turn to her. I kept my eyes on the judge, because I knew what was coming. That number, the one she didn't know existed, was real. And it was clean. Every dollar, every transaction, every contract logged and paid and filed. All of it traceable. All of it hidden in plain sight because I had never needed her to validate it. I hadn't needed to brag. I just needed to survive. I had learned a long time ago that the best revenge isn't shouting. The silence backed by fact. Susan staggered as she sat back down. Her knees buckled slightly. She gripped the edge of the table like someone who had miscalculated the drop. The court clerk shifted in her chair, pretending not to notice the way my wife's world had just tilted sideways. That was the moment the script fell apart. They weren't expecting that number. Because in her story I was the con, the man who took and lied and hid. She had built a whole case around it. Mark had written it in his affidavit. Mr. Hall's unreliable financial history and lack of verifiable income raised serious concerns. But I had been more than verifiable. I had just been quiet. I'd made my money quietly through freelance security contracts, technical analysis, infrastructure assessment, government subcontracting. It wasn't glamorous work, and it sure as hell wasn't flashy. But it paid. And I never shared the details with Susan because she never asked. Somewhere around year 15, she stopped asking what I did at all. So I worked, I filed, I saved, and I kept the records. All of them. In the silence that followed the judge's announcement, I thought about the first time Susan said she loved me. It was in the trailer, late fall, rain tapping the tin roof like a drum. We'd just lost power. I was wearing a torn thermal and trying to fix the generator. She'd come up behind me, kissed the back of my neck, and said, "You make me feel safe." I used to carry that sentence like a shield. Now it felt like a joke. That courtroom was the real beginning. Not the affair. Not the hidden bank statements I later found. Not the long drives to Bible study with no return calls. This, the moment she tried to erase me in front of the court, was when I knew. The marriage was already over. Had been for years. I just hadn't accepted it. But that day I did. And I said nothing. Because I knew the reckoning hadn't even started yet. You don't notice betrayal until it starts walking past you on two legs and calling itself routine. That's how Susan's shift began. Not as an explosion, but as a slow decay. Her lies wore the face of normalcy. A Tuesday night, late at the office. A Saturday trip to help her sister reorganize the garage. A weekly Bible study that suddenly added new nights. She kept her phone face down. Always. At first, I didn't question it. After all, I was working too. Most days I was neck-deep in military subcontractor paperwork or flying across the country for security assessments. The money came in thick and quiet. I'd been discreet about it, part habit, part pride. I didn't need Susan to validate it. I just needed to know that the bills were paid and the fridge was full. But one night, around midnight, I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water and saw her silhouette glow from the hallway. Not the bedroom, the hallway. She was whispering into her phone. The light from the screen lit up half her face like a ghost's mask. She didn't hear me behind her. I stood there in the dark and watched as she smiled, soft, private. A smile I hadn't seen aimed at me in years. She caught my reflection in the glass of the oven and flinched. Her voice dropped to a murmur. She turned, ending the call with a sharp, "I'll talk to you later." I didn't say a word. I just filled my glass and walked back to bed. That silence between us, it lasted 2 weeks. Then came Josh, my stepson, 23, built like a linebacker, brain like a calculator, heart like a crowbar. I never expected love from him, but I had earned, at the very least, tolerance. I paid for his braces, his summer camps, his car insurance. He never said thank you. Not once. But I assumed that was just the price of being a stepfather. You give, and one day maybe you get to be invited to his wedding. Instead, I got the storage unit. There's a small place I rent outside of Lee's Summit. A basic metal unit behind a strip mall, with rust at the corners and an old keypad that only I knew the code for. It wasn't filled with junk. It was filled with me. Service medals, contracts, old files, bank records, letters, copies of classified project approvals. The life I never brought into our shared home. Susan called it my man cave in exile. She joked that I must be hiding something in there, vintage porn or tax evasion. She wasn't entirely wrong. I was hiding the one thing she never tried to see. The truth. I found out through a whisper. The manager of the storage unit, a guy named Carl, soft-spoken, always smelled like beef jerky, called me just past midnight. He's inside, Carl whispered. Big guy, got bolt cutters. I only recognized him from the photo you showed me. I haven't called the cops. Thought you should know first. I didn't get in the truck. I didn't drive down. I didn't confront him. I just opened my phone and sent one message to a private drive folder titled Susan and Ellerton. Then I waited. At the next hearing, a procedural follow-up, scheduled weeks after her courtroom ambush, I showed up in the same dusty suit. Susan wore navy. Mark wore that same smug expression like the courtroom was his home gym. But the judge, he looked different. Sharper. Less bored. He adjusted his collar and turned to Susan. Mrs. Hall, he said slowly. Were you aware your husband reported over $520,000 in income last year? It was déjà vu, but this time it had weight. Susan blinked. No, that can't be right. That's not possible. Mark stepped in. Your Honor, we've seen no proof of that figure. Mr. Hall has not disclosed. But I had already handed the folder to my lawyer, and he passed it to the clerk before Mark's sentence could finish. Worn, green military issue. Inside, full tax returns from the past 6 years. Notarized bank statements. Scanned copies of government contracts. And the crown jewel. Printed email chains between Mark and Susan. Discussing strategy. Collusion. Fabricating claims. Altering the narrative of my mental health, my income, my supposed disappearances. And the final nail. A typed letter, digitally signed, sent from Susan's email to Mark. If we can make him look like he's unstable, the judge will take our side. I don't care what it takes. Make it look clean. Susan turned pale. Mark reached for the folder like he could stuff the contents back in before they burned. Too late. The judge set his pen down. Slowly, like it was a sword. Mr. Ellerton, he said. You're an officer of this court. Are you telling me you submitted altered tax assessments as part of your filing? Mark tried to speak. Something about restructuring and interpretive accounting. But the judge was already speaking to the clerk. Refer this to the State Bar. And notify the IRS. The courtroom wasn't a courtroom anymore. It was a coffin. Susan's mouth hung open. Her face drained of everything but dread. She wasn't crying, not yet. There were no tears, no pleading. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes when the mask finally slips, and there's nothing underneath it. Her betrayal hadn't broken me. But watching it fail, watching her lies melt in her hands like ash, that's what ended us. A week later, she left. Quietly. No goodbye. She took what she could carry and drove off in the sedan I paid for. Mark vanished too. His ads disappeared from bus benches. His practice was under review. They said he went to Florida. Maybe she followed. Maybe she didn't. I didn't ask. I stayed. The house was mine. Bought in my name. Paid off by my hands. The title had my name and mine alone. Another thing she hadn't realized, or maybe just didn't care to. Emma, my daughter, the only child in that house who ever called me dad without needing to be reminded, stayed too. She was 22, back from college, trying to figure out who she was now that the world didn't have training wheels. She didn't take sides. She watched. She listened. And then one night, she looked up from her laptop and said, "You don't yell, Dad. You're just real." It was the first moment of peace I'd felt in months. I didn't resume life the way it had been. I didn't chase new contracts. I didn't try to get back on my feet, because I had never fallen. I had just been pushed by people too small to see the size of what I was carrying. So I sat on the porch most mornings. Black coffee, sunrise, silence. I didn't block Susan's number. I didn't need to. She never called. Not to apologize. Not to explain. Not to see how Emma was. She vanished completely. They say when a storm passes, the silence it leaves is louder than the thunder. They're right. Sometimes the cleanest form of justice is to do nothing. Just stand still and let the truth decay everything that fed on lies. That's what I did after the folder hit the courtroom table like a coffin lid. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look at Susan. I just watched the weight of the truth collapse everything she and Mark had built together. Their narrative, their plan, their fantasy where I walked away penniless and branded. Every document we presented wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a scalpel. Sliced through every paragraph they had submitted. The judge read each line with the face of a man realizing he'd almost been used. It took 15 minutes to unravel a year's worth of plotting. At one point, the judge asked again, directly this time, "Mr. Ellerton, I am giving you an opportunity. Were these tax filings submitted in good faith?" Mark stared at his shoes. I advised some restructuring. "Did you alter your client's records in any way to gain favorable terms in the divorce?" "No, Your Honor," he said, but the pause before no was half a second too long. Long enough to draw blood. By the time we recessed, Susan couldn't even meet her own reflection. Her hands stayed clasped in her lap like she was praying. She still wore the same navy blouse, the one I bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She had worn it then with grace, laughter, a candlelit dinner we didn't deserve. Now it looked like a costume, something borrowed from a stranger. Outside the courthouse, people drifted past in the early morning light. Life moving on while our marriage died in slow, public motion. Susan said nothing to me that day. Not a glance. Not a whisper. She walked out of the building flanked by silence. Mark was gone by then. Disappeared. I heard later he took an indefinite leave of absence from the bar. His office line disconnected. His assistant told a reporter he was taking time to regroup. The story made the local paper, buried beneath an article about a new strip mall. Local divorce lawyer under review for alleged filing misconduct. The byline didn't mention Susan, but the whispers knew. I didn't want revenge. That's what people always assume, that a man wants to win. No, I didn't need Susan to suffer. I just needed her to stop pretending. Stop lying to herself. Stop painting over a wall that had been crumbling for years. We built nothing real in the end. Just rituals, routines, Sunday brunch with fake smiles, anniversary cards bought on the way home from work, conversations filtered through the television screen. Everything was surface. Even the betrayal didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how little I missed her after she left. She moved out a week later, like a thief who had nothing left to steal. The boxes were small. No furniture. Just clothes, her jewelry box, and some photo albums. Not one family portrait. Not one of Emma's drawings from 2nd grade. She left those behind like forgotten grocery lists. I watched her load the car from the upstairs window. She didn't look back at the house. She didn't knock on Emma's door. She just drove away. The silence she left behind wasn't hollow. It was clean. The kind of silence that finally lets your thoughts echo. I started sleeping again. No more 3 a.m. pacing, no more grinding my teeth. The nights were long but peaceful. I took to sitting on the porch around 6 in the morning. Just me, my mug, and the slow unfolding of the sky. I didn't need therapy. I didn't need closure. I needed this space, air, time. I started saying no to work. No to extra hours. No to last-minute travel. No to high-risk contracts that bled money and time but impressed people I didn't care about. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing something. I was standing still, watching everything settle. And in that stillness, I began to see clearly. One morning, Emma came out onto the porch and sat beside me. She didn't say anything at first. She sipped from a chipped mug with a faded cartoon owl. Her legs were curled beneath her like she used to do when she was 9. After a while, she asked. Did you know she was going to say all that in court? No. Did you want to fight back? No, I said. I just wanted it to end. She nodded. You were calm. That was scary. We both laughed, but not like it was funny, like it was real, because calm can terrify people more than rage. It's the quiet that comes after you've lost everything and still choose to stand. Later that week, Emma found the folder. Not the one I gave the judge. A different one. The one from the storage unit. The one Josh tried to pry open with bolt cutters, thinking maybe he'd find valuables to hawk. She found it on the kitchen counter, left there by accident, or maybe not. She opened it, flipped through the commendations, the service records, the handwritten letters from clients, employers, military personnel who thanked me for work I wasn't allowed to talk about. She said nothing for a long time. Then, why didn't you tell me? Didn't think it mattered. It matters to me. That was the first time I felt something settle back into place. Not pride, not vindication, just a sense that someone saw me, really saw me. I had spent years being unseen in my own home. The stepfather, the breadwinner, the placeholder. And for what? Susan never asked what I'd done before her. Never wanted to know. She liked the version of me that stood quietly behind her. The man who paid for vacations, made repairs, showed up on time, and never asked for thanks. But that man was gone. Now there was only me, stripped down, simplified. Still solid. I didn't tell Emma everything. Some things aren't meant to be spoken. But I did tell her this. Never let someone else tell your story. If you stay silent long enough, they'll write the ending for you. She nodded. Is that what Mom tried to do? She didn't know the whole story. She didn't want to. And in the silence that followed, something passed between us. An understanding. A rebuilding not of the family but of the truth. Brick by quiet brick. A week later, the realtor called. Susan had listed her condo. Needed quick cash. I said nothing, just took note. Then came the letter from her lawyer, a different one this time. Clean suit. New name. Quiet tone. They were seeking to renegotiate. Too late. The judge had already ruled. All premarital assets remained mine. Custody of our shared accounts was closed. Susan would pay her own legal fees. No spousal support. No division of military pensions. No claim to the property where she had once planted daffodils and now wanted leverage. My lawyer sent back 2 sentences. All settlements finalized. No further discussion. Mr. Hall does not wish to revisit terms. It was over. No confetti. No applause. Just the sound of a door closing quietly in the background. I didn't walk into the final hearing looking for a fight. I walked in ready to be done. The courtroom was smaller this time. Quieter. No media. No sparks. Just a few worn faces and a judge who looked like he'd seen enough lives unravel for one career. I sat across from Susan, who didn't meet my eye. She looked thinner. Not sick, just emptied. She wore a gray jacket this time. Her hair pulled back like it was trying to hold her together. The new lawyer beside her was young, pale, uncomfortable. He had the look of a man brought in too late to clean up someone else's mess. My attorney leaned in and whispered, "They're not contesting anything." I nodded. The judge flipped through the last few pages and cleared his throat. This court finds no grounds to amend prior determinations. All premarital assets shall remain the sole property of Mr. Hall. The marital home is awarded to Mr. Hall. Each party shall be responsible for their respective legal fees. No spousal support awarded. Custody of financial accounts is closed. Divorce finalized. There it was. No gavel. No applause. Just the final breath of a dying thing. Susan blinked once. Then twice. Her hand trembled as she reached for her water. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. But I watched her shoulders collapse inward, like something invisible had been holding her up and finally gave out. That was the moment it hit her. Not when the documents came out. Not when Mark fell. But now, when there was nothing left to leverage. No assets to demand. No spin to control. Just silence, clean and sharp. Outside the courthouse, the sky was flat and gray. I didn't linger. I didn't turn back. I drove straight home, pulled into the driveway, and walked toward the old shed behind the house. Everyone used to joke about it, said it looked like a crime scene, said it was filled with junk. Susan never went inside. Emma did once, when she was little, holding a flashlight, pretending we were explorers. But I had always known what was inside. I opened the rusted door, let the scent of wood and time wrap around me. It wasn't much, just a long bench, a few sealed bins, a stack of military crates, some battered folders lined with dust. My uniforms were folded with care. My boots sat where I left them. Commendations, certificates, letters, all laid out like a secret museum of a life no one asked about. I sat on the bench and ran my fingers over an old ID tag. My photo, younger, harder. A man who had seen war zones and famine, security breaches and black sites. A man who'd carried dead friends across borders. A man who'd once defused a bomb under sniper fire in northern Syria, and then drove home to mow the lawn and cook dinner for a woman who asked him why the sink was still leaking. That man had disappeared somewhere inside a mortgage and the hum of routine. But he never stopped existing. I lit a cigarette even though I'd quit years ago. The flame flickered against the metal walls. I stared into it like it might speak. And in that shed, surrounded by my own discarded history, I finally understood something. Revenge is noise. It's explosions, screaming, courtroom drama and shouted insults. That's what they wanted from me. A man unhinged. A man with something to prove. But I hadn't given them that. I had given them truth. And truth doesn't need to shout. It just stands. Still, patient, unflinching. It's not the hammer. It's the weight that makes the structure crack under its own rot. When I walked out of that shed, the sun had started to break through the gray. Just a little. Emma was sitting on the porch. She looked up as I approached and said, "Mom called." I waited. She wanted to know if you'd changed your mind. I haven't. She nodded. I told her not to call again. I sat beside her. We didn't speak for a long time. Eventually, she asked, "Do you regret marrying her?" I didn't answer right away. The question wasn't simple. The years weren't simple. "I regret giving myself to someone who never saw me," I said finally. "But I don't regret showing up, even if it was for the wrong person." Emma looked out over the lawn. "So what now?" "Now I live." That night I cooked dinner for the two of us. Nothing fancy, just chili in old bowls like back in the trailer days. Emma laughed when she saw the plastic spoons. "You're not gonna pretend we're broke again, are you?" "No," I said, "just remembering." After dinner, I sat by the window with a whiskey. No TV, no phone, just the hum of the refrigerator and the knowledge that my house was finally mine. Not just legally, but spiritually. Empty of poison. Empty of the daily dying that comes from trying to prove your worth to someone committed to ignoring it. The calls never came again. Not from Susan. Not from Mark. Not from anyone who once tried to make me doubt the ground I stood on. They had built a story. But the truth walked in, quiet as smoke, and tore the roof off. So now I speak to you, whoever you are, whatever your silence has cost you. If you've ever been told you're just the past, if you've ever been told you're invisible, a placeholder, a temporary fix for someone else's emptiness, wait, just wait. Don't argue. Don't scream. Don't explain. Let them write their fiction. And when they've built their house of lies, let truth walk in. Because truth doesn't need to knock. It owns the damn key. So I'll end with a question. If you were me, standing in that courtroom, hearing your wife of 25 years call you a fake in front of strangers, would you have fought back? Or would you have done what I did? Let her finish her monologue, and then let the truth burn the script? You tell me, was I wrong to stay quiet? Or did silence speak louder than vengeance ever could?